Hello and welcome. This is Captain Aquarius, doing business again as Dan First, coming to you on June the 30th of 2016 with this brief 10-minute video about the black moon that is coming on July the 4th. And at this time, once again, as will be the case with the full moon in July, there's going to be an important planetary alignment, which is somewhat adversarial in its nature because it means that the planets that are involved are not really getting along with each other, and therefore the planetary combination tends to bring out the more difficult, negative, limiting features of the planets that are involved, and therefore it's important to talk about these things in terms of the ways that we may find these conditions reflected in the behavior of human individuals and entire societies. First, to get our bearings, you notice up in the 10th house of this chart, which is the house of our profession, the house of the way that we operate in the outer world and are known for what we do. There is a strong combination of 4 planets, all of them in the sign of Cancer, which is the sign of the home and the mother. The way that you can tell that this is the moment of a black moon or dark moon is that the moon and the sun at 12 degrees of Cancer and 53 minutes are in exactly the same position in the zodiac. This is one of the 2 main lunations that happen every month when these 2 great lights align precisely, as different from their other important combination at the full moon when they are exactly opposite to each other. I am defining the term the black moon or the dark moon in classical, ancient, traditional terms to mean something different from the new moon. Nowadays, most people use these terms interchangeably, but to me, as was the case with classical astronomers and astrologers, the new moon is the moment when the moon first becomes visible again in her cycle, and we see this first very thin crescent or cup of the moon becoming visible again. This happens 2 days after the black moon itself, which is a distinct event. And it's important because the black moon is the time when our psychic receptivity is greatest, our capacity to vision and imagine and form intention, both personally and communally, is strongest. And that's why this is a time that is so valuable for coming together to do intentional ceremonies in which the members of the group voice their individual intentions, strengthen them for one another, and then support them with energies of intention and meditation and sound. So this is always an important moment here at any black moon or dark moon, and the emphasis here, because it's in Cancer, the sign of the home and the mother, is that our emphasis is very strong now on our own personal individual turf, on the space that we occupy on the earth plane, on our sense of being grounded and rooted in the earth. So it is no wonder that the emphasis of so many people now is narrow in its focus as they are thinking more and more about their own personal, individual, family dimension of things that concern them immediately, rather than the wider communal dimension of things that affect their society, their country, their entire planet. Necessarily at this time, our focus becomes somewhat narrower, and no wonder this is the case because there are so many difficult events going on in the outer realm that this narrowing of focus almost becomes inevitable. To understand the main dynamics of the time, however, and this is going to continue really all the way from now to October, we look at the conditions that we have been following now in these lunations ever since May. Look, for example, in the 3rd house of the chart, you see the planet Saturn there at 10 degrees of the sign of Sagittarius. This planet, which represents limitation, the practical weight of reality on the earth plane. This planet is in a 90-degree angle, which is called a square, which is traditionally considered somewhat afflictive and stressful and difficult, with the planet Neptune, who is in the 6th house at 11 degrees of Pisces. The point of the combination here of Neptune and Saturn is that if these planets are getting along well, then they can combine for the purpose of producing noble self-sacrifice, the action of caring for others, the principle of observing caution and restraint, and having a kind of prophetic foresight about the consequences of our actions. However, as these planets are not getting along now in this 90-degree angle, the emphasis shifts instead to a conflict between the higher self and the lower self. There tends to be distrust, insincerity, dissatisfaction with one's condition, arguing and complaining, the enduring of painful emotional conditions, many of them self-inflicted. We notice also over in the 12th house that the planet Jupiter, who looks like the number 4 in the sign of Virgo, is now moving ahead. He's at 17 degrees of this sign, meaning that as he goes forward, he is coming out of the T-cross arrangement that he formed before with the 2 other planets, even though Jupiter is in a still wonderful angle of relationship with Pluto in the 4th house of the home in this chart, so there is still the ability, despite this narrowing of focus at the Cancer Black Moon, to envision large, ambitious plans that have the possibility of enlisting large numbers of people in intentional, grand processes of transforming our communities and our planet. Notice that with Jupiter in the 12th and with Neptune in the 6th, there are other symbols in proximity to them. They look like horseshoes, one right side up, the other upside down. These are the 2 moon's nodes, which, unlike the planets in the chart, which move counterclockwise, the nodes move the other way. They move clockwise, so therefore, as the months had passed, the nodes are going to come into closer and closer combination with Saturn and Neptune. The effect of this, you see, is that this emphasis that the negative Saturn-Neptune combination produces applies increasingly to groups of people at all levels. That is, small family groups, work groups, neighborhood groups, communities, and larger groups, all of which will tend to feel this impulse toward division from and against one another. So it is no wonder that this combination continues from now until October, so that the culmination of all of this is not at the American presidential election in November. No, the crisis and the climax come before that in October, and we will look at more of this later. The point here is not so much what the details of the event are as what our response to it needs to be. We can be sure now, because Neptune represents, among other things, deception and fraud and lying and misleading behavior, that we are going to see more of the kinds of false flag events that have happened yet again in the disastrous Orlando, Florida nightclub shooting, which, like the San Bernardino shootings, like the Paris violence of last November, is yet another false flag event designed by the executioners in the CIA, the powers that be, the controlling archons that want to maintain their dominance of the planet by keeping everyone in fear. Now, naturally, these things are conveyed and presented in such a way as to stoke as much fear as possible. But to look at the reality of it, they are a sign that the archons are losing control. The closer we come to liberation and to awakening and enlightenment, the more of these things are going to occur until We claim our communal leadership and we break through into freedom. Have courage.